Hey, this is Steve Thiel with BC Gurus, and this is part 4 of search engine optimization. In this video, we're going to learn how to set up the Business Catalyst SEO features. Now, if you haven't watched the previous videos on keyword research and on-page optimization, I highly recommend that you go watch those right now because it's going to help this video make a lot more sense. So the first thing that we want to focus on with our on-page optimization is the title tags and meta descriptions. Now, again, from on-page optimization, we want to make sure that we're targeting only one keyword phrase within each and staying within the character limits. Now, I'm going to be showing you how to do this within Business Catalyst. I'm going to be focusing in on the most important core features of BC. So we're going to learn how to do SEO for web pages, blogs, e-commerce, and web apps. So here we are in the admin of BC, and you can see we're looking at a web page. Now, doing on-page optimization for the title, tag, and meta description is relatively straightforward. So for page title, Business Catalyst has that outlined very clearly here for us. This page title is what you need to be using to fill in the title tag. And then down below, it's a little more hidden, but to set the meta description for a page, click on this page properties icon right here, and that'll load up the page properties window where you can enter in the description. Now make sure you're not entering in the page title here. Make sure that you're doing it within the BC page title field. And as well, if you're more comfortable in code, you can go to HTML view and insert within the head the description, and you can edit that right here. Next, we're looking at the blog module. Now, the blog module is not as friendly as web pages. You can see that we've got a post title, and that's going to go ahead and populate within the title tag. So whatever the post title is, that's going to show in the title. That doesn't cause much problem. But what does cause a little bit of a problem is there's no way to set a meta description with a blog post. So keep that in mind. It's not the end of the world because Google doesn't use the meta description for the actual ranking algorithm, but it does help with showing a nice clean presentation in the search results. So blogs do not have that feature. It's not the end of the world, but you can't do it. Alright, so next we're looking at e-commerce and specifically products. So for products, you've got a product name, but that's just used for the internal naming. If you scroll down and you go to more options, you've got a product title. This is going to be your title tag, and make sure that you're filling that in accordingly. Now, for the meta description, again, like blogs, that's not built in, but there is a way to get around that. We can use a custom field for the description. So if you want to have that nice clean meta description for your products, use one of the custom fields, and then when you're setting up the overall layout of your products, just make sure that you're including that custom field as the value for your meta description. Alright, lastly here we're looking at web apps, and web apps is somewhat friendly for SEO. It uses the item name for the title tag, which can be inconvenient because it's also what's going to be used for the name of the web app item within your website. So if you really need a specific title tag, you're going to have to use the item name to accomplish that and basically create another custom field for the item name. So you're basically hijacking the item name default field for the title tag and having to create a custom field for the internal naming of the web app item. And then as well, there's nothing built into web apps for a meta description, but you can include a custom field like we've done here on the BC Gurus blog, which is our subheadline. You can create that meta description value here, and then using the layouts within web apps, you can include the custom field in your meta description, similar to how you would do it with e-commerce. So if you're a bit confused on how to actually make that happen as far as the e-commerce and web apps, as far as manipulating the different layouts to include the meta description, watch some of the other videos in our core training, and they will educate you on how to actually include that within those specific layouts. Alright, so next on our on-page optimization, we want to look at the URL paths. And within Business Catalyst, you can make changes to pretty much every URL path that is important. So again, similar to the title and descriptions, we just want to include one keyword phrase somewhere in the file or folder structure. And there is no character limit to the number of words or characters that you can include in the URL description, so you can include other keywords if you want. Alright, so looking at the admin again and looking at web pages, you can see that it's got a friendly page URL here. Just click edit and you can change the URL to include your keyword. And then within blog posts, we also have a very convenient URL tool, which is going to by default take the post title name and include it in the URL, but you can edit that to include just the keyword or whatever you'd like in the URL. Looking at e-commerce and products, same thing. You've got the ability to manipulate the URL. Again, it takes the name of the product and pre-populates, but you can edit that to whatever you'd like. And then lastly, looking at web apps, again, same concept, very friendly. You can change the URL here to include whatever keywords you like. Now, as far as the other on-page optimization within the content of each page, including keywords within headings or bolding, italicizing, linking keywords, that can all be done within the WYSIWYG editor. So I would imagine that everybody knows how to use that tool and bold, italicize, and link. I won't go into it there, but that's how you would do the other on-page optimization within each of the pages, blog posts, and products, etc. Alright, so after you've done your on-page optimization, there's a few other things that you should consider. One of them is 301 URL redirection. So this is important if your client currently has a website and they have pages and you're going to be changing the URL structure. So all a URL is a permanent redirect from page A to B. And this is going to help out on your SEO efforts because it's going to avoid 404 pages, and it's going to make sure that there's not any loss in your previous SEO efforts. The way that 301s work is when you redirect with a 301 from an old page to a new page, all of the links that are pointing to that old page, all those rankings for that previous page, when you do a 301, they immediately get transferred to the new page. So any link juice, 90 to 99% of that is going to be passed to the new page. So you definitely need to make sure that you're doing this if the client has a current website and you're changing the URL structure. Alright, so back in the admin here, doing 301 redirects for web pages is actually built into the web page editor. You can see under more options, there is a 301 redirect ability right here. So if it was a relatively small site and their previous site and you're setting up the new one on BC, you could theoretically go in and create a web page for all the old pages on the previous site and then 301 redirect to the new, but that's a little bit cumbersome. But I did want to show you this feature. It's on web pages only. You can do a 301 redirect to a different location on the website. Now, where the real magic happens with 301 redirects within Business Catalyst is under Web Pages, and then instead of viewing the tree view, click on URL Redirects. And here we can see we have a full list of all the old source URLs and where they're now pointing to. And the feature here that we want to focus in on is the ability to import URLs. So before you go live with a new website, you want to make sure you go to the client's old website and grab all of the links from the old website. And I usually just do this through a manual process of clicking through the navigation and grabbing the URL from the browser and adding it to a Excel spreadsheet. So after you've done that, you want to go ahead and click on the Import URL Redirects, and it's going to give you this button, Download Import Template. Go ahead and download that. Alright, so here is the import file that Business Catalyst gives you. You can see that it is pretty straightforward, old and new URL. And you'll see down here in the notes, this information is actually dated. You can now do redirects for ASPX pages and a whole host of other features. So don't get caught up on these outdated instructions, but the sheet itself is relatively straightforward, old and new. And when you're saving this out, make sure you save it as a CSV file or tab delineated file. So after you've saved out the import sheet and you've gotten all the old URLs from the old website and figured out where they're pointing to on the new, just go ahead and upload it here through the URL redirect interface. And after your client's website goes live, make sure you keep an eye on the Webmaster Tools, which we'll show you how to set up here in a couple slides. Go in there and check for 404 pages after going live, and Google Webmaster Tools will tell you which pages are 404. And make sure you check that and do another import for any pages that you might have missed. Alright, so next on our list of Business Catalyst features that you need to consider setting up for SEO are the sitemap and robots file. And these are kind of technical, but sitemap.xml. So by default, Business Catalyst auto-generates a sitemap file of all the pages, web pages, blog posts, products, web apps, all items on the website, and auto-generates it to this file. Now, if you don't like the way that Google does it, you can actually go ahead and disable that by going into the file manager and deleting the sitemap XML file or modifying it to however you like it. So let's actually take a look at that in the file manager. Alright, so when you are in the admin, you can see that if you go to Site Manager and File Manager, within the root folder is going to be a sitemap.xml file. Now, it is not here on this particular website because we've deleted it, but it will show up here by default. And if you were wanting to do a custom sitemap XML file, you would go ahead and upload it to the root directory. Now, here's what the sitemap XML file actually looks like. Don't worry about what it looks like if it's just being auto-generated. Just know that that's the site path that you need to remember and register with Google Webmaster Tools, which we'll look at here in a couple slides. Now, the other technical item here is the robots.txt file. Now, by default, Business Catalyst is not going to create this file for you. You're going to have to create it and upload it through the file manager. Now, what a robots.txt file does, it basically gives instructions to the search engines on what folders and files it should be indexing and making available through the search results. Now, this is important because there's certain things within your website that you might not want Google to index. So looking at our file manager here, we've got all these folders that start with underscores: Ajax, Index, files, trash, etc. Some of these we don't want Google to index, or maybe this LP folder, which is our landing page folder. We don't want those indexed. Now, through the robot.txt file, we can actually control what Google is indexing. So what a robots file actually looks like is this. So the first line is the user agent, and we typically always just do a wildcard which says all search engines follow these rules. And then within there, you're going to disallow certain folders and files within Business Catalyst. So you can see we've excluded these folders that are for, our CSS files, demos, etc. But then there's also specific ASPX files like custom content CRM, default ASPX. You want to go ahead and disallow Google from indexing those for duplicate content reasons. And we'll get into that into the next slide. Don't feel like you need to copy this down. Included in the resources is an example robots.txt file with all of the default Business Catalyst ASPX pages that we like to disallow access to. Alright, so next on the Business Catalyst features that we need to set up is taking care of duplicate content. So Google doesn't like duplicate content at all. It wants to see a page and have that page be completely unique. Now, Business Catalyst has some drawbacks in that it gives you the production URL of, whatever your name is, bcgurus.businesscatalyst.com or bcgurus.worldsecuresystems.com for your secure URL link. And if you've got other secondary domains like bcgurus2.com, if I had that, that would also be duplicate content. So in that scenario, when Google would hit a page, if it were to index all 4 of those, it would see duplicate content 4 times, which it definitely does not like. So the way that we can go ahead and prevent Google from indexing this duplicate content is through the site domains within the admin. Go ahead and click on the default Business Catalyst URL. Now, if you're branded URL, it's going to have a branded partner. It's going to give you your branded URL. But go ahead and click on this and click Edit, and it's going to load up the Edit System screen. You want to make sure that the redirect to default domain is checked. Now that's going to prevent your production URLs from actually getting indexed and remove that threat of duplicate content. You're also going to want to make sure that you do that for any of your secondary URLs. Make sure that those are pointing to your primary URL so you don't get duplicate content there either. And then the last one, we already talked about this, is system pages. Make sure that you're disallowing indexing of those through your robots.txt file, or you can also use the canonical tag within code to point system pages to their true primary URL. Now, I won't get into the specifics of what a canonical tag is, but if you do a Google for that, it's just rel canonical, and it resides within the head of your HTML, and a simple Google search will tell you how to do that. Alright, so after you've set up those things, you're pretty much good to go with doing on-page optimization within Business Catalyst. The last thing on your list is you want to make sure that Webmaster Tools is set up with Google and then also Bing. So you want to make sure that you do this with your client's email address, and the importance of doing this is so you can connect it to their analytics and AdWords account if they have that. And you want to make sure that you're registering the sitemap XML file that is auto-generated within BC, and then the robots.txt file that we have manually created. So after you've got access to or set up your client's Google Webmaster Tools account, you want to go to Optimization here on the side and click on Sitemaps. And that's going to go ahead and load the screen where you can add a sitemap. And you can see I've already got one added, but just click that and you would enter in sitemap.xml, and that'll go ahead and register that with Webmaster Tools. And this is helpful so Google knows about all the pages within your client's website. And then the second part is actually making sure that Google is registering your robots.txt file. And to check that, just click on Health and Blocked URLs. And that's going to go ahead and load up your robots.txt file and show you that yes, it's registered and that they are blocking URLs successfully. Alright, so that's it for the Business Catalyst SEO features. Again, it's basic lever pulling and just making sure that you have the ability to include the keywords in the key spots that you need them, which is the title tag, meta description, in the content, in the URL, and making sure that you're pointing any old pages to their new locations, and then making sure that you're disallowing content that you don't want to be accessed, and making sure that there isn't any duplicate content within the website, and then registering the sitemap and robots files with Webmaster Tools. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at the Google algorithm and some other SEO factors that you should consider.